right, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you happen to be in the world today. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to attend this latest bootcamp session, Strategies to Pricing Security Programs. So hopefully you attended part one last week. We kicking off this series for Cybersecurity Awareness Month. So last week we talked about strategies to building your cybersecurity programs. How do you structure them? How many programs should you have? What features do you include in them? Why are we building them the way that we are? So we went through that whole philosophy and methodology around that. Today, what we're going to be talking about is how do you price those programs? And we're not going to be focusing on, even though I'll give you some price ranges, I want to focus more on the theory of what goes into setting prices, because depending on where you are in the world, what goes into the pricing is relatively going to be the same, depending on where you are in the world and the currencies and the exchange rate and stuff like that, the prices are going to be a little bit different. So that's why I want to focus more on the theory and the components that make up pricing. We're going to go through a pricing calculator that is there. It's a handout for everybody to download if you don't have a copy of this, so that you can take the today's session and then lay it over the costing calculator so you can come up with your own specific pricing based on the program design that you selected to go forward with. So it's going to be an interesting, hopefully informative session, and looking to get everybody's feedback on that. So if you've never attended any of my office hours or boot camps in the past, my name is Stefanie Hammond. I am the head nerd here at Enable, responsible for all things sales and marketing related. I've been with Enable for a little while now. You can see my contact information there on the screen, my email address if you have any questions, and also I'm on LinkedIn. Just a couple of housekeeping reminders before we get going. I do have everyone on mute. That's just to maintain call quality. But if you have any questions as we're going through the material today, make sure you get them into the question panel. I will do my best to answer as many of them as I can. If for some reason I'm not able to answer your question live, I do commit to getting an answer back to you either later on today or tomorrow. This session is being recorded, even though there is already a version of this on demand within Enable U. Every time I deliver a bootcamp, I'm always making some adjustments, always making some changes. I made some changes to this one. So this session is being recorded. It will be sent off to marketing, it will be cleaned up, and then it'll be uploaded into Enable U to replace the existing one that's there, and then the old one will be taken down. If for some reason you need a copy of this recording, faster before marketing can get it uploaded, just let me know and I can send you over the raw recording of that. Not a problem. All right, so as mentioned, this is part two of a three-part series that I started last week. I think today's session might take around 75 minutes, 90 minutes to kind of get through, but it seems to be an incredibly important topic because I think I pretty much get on a weekly basis the question around pricing. How should I be pricing my programs, or what's the average price, that MSPs are charging in my area? And as I mentioned last week, it's kind of a loaded question, this pricing one, and it's one that doesn't have a simple answer to it. But hopefully, the goal of this three-part series is that you will come to appreciate when I say, it depends. Can't really tell you that. It depends on who you're selling to and what you're selling. And so with today's follow-up from last week's bootcamp, what are we going to be talking about? So obviously we're going to be talking about the theory when it comes into setting your MSP program pricing. There's different ways that MSPs can price their programs. We're just going to review one option for you to use if this is something that you might be struggling with today. We're also going to be reviewing some common pricing mistakes that I commonly see MSPs make when it comes to pricing out their program, including not being disciplined enough to implement annual price increases. And we're going to talk about some strategies on how you can get those implemented, review some tips on how you can improve in that area. And then we're going to go through a pricing lab. and we're going to review our costing calculator, and we're going to review, kind of the different components, as I mentioned, that go into setting your monthly price so that you can accurately price out your programs so that they generate healthy margins for your MSP. And so we are going to go through how to price out an essentials program, and we're going to talk about how to price out an advanced program. And so if you're not familiar with what goes into an essential program or an advanced program, I'm not going to go into a huge lot of detail into that today because we covered it last week. So if you're not sure, okay, what does an essentials program has, what does an advanced program have, I do really encourage you to look at last week's bootcamp strategies to building security programs that has been uploaded brand new into the Enable You, so it is there. All right, so just before we start, I always like to start this session with a poll. Because I'm curious to see people that are on the line, what are you charging for your programs today? So are we charging less than $100 a user? Are we charging between $100 and $200 per user? Are we charging more than $200 per user? Or maybe you're someone that, we charge per device. Or are you someone that says, you know what, our pricing kind of varies by customer. We don't really have, we're pricing by our gut, basically. All right, so we're at about three-quarters of the people that have voted. We'll give it a couple more moments to see if we can get the final participants to maybe push us to 100, but right now it looks like with 75% of people that have voted, 67% charge per device, and 33% are saying that our price varies by customer. Amazing, appreciate that. Okay, and then at the end of this boot camp, I will give some price ranges so that you can kind of see how the industry is pricing the industry as a whole, and then also have a more informal poll from our business transformation partners that are involved in that program and what their pricing is. All right, so 67% are charging per device, 33% pricing varies by customer. Absolutely appreciate that feedback, and would love to maybe get your feedback afterwards when we go through this session to see if maybe that changes the way that maybe you think about pricing, or for the 33% we're saying kind of varies. Hopefully I can help you bring some structure into that pricing exercise moving forward. Okay, so kicking things off, we're going to review one approach that you can use to help set your pricing based on the programs that we talked about last week. Because as I said, it is the #1 question that I do get asked by MSPs. I think I was asked it once yesterday, and I was asked it 4 times last week. What should I be charging for X? Or what are other MSPs charging for X? And usually X is around a tool. How do I price EDR, endpoint detection response? How do I price MDR, managed detection response? How do I price my backup? How do I price, password management? It's really around how do I price an individual product that I might be purchasing, or maybe I have purchased, but now I want to resell that product to my customer. And again, my immediate response, and I know people hate this response, is it depends. And the reason I say that is it really depends. Who are you selling to? Who are you targeting with that? Because depending on what type of organization that you're selling into, that's going to guide you on what you should be charging them. And then when we look at the MSP space, there's really 2 types of customers that we're selling to. The first being the traditional managed services customer type. And how do I define that? So I define the traditional MSP client as typically a smaller organization, typically less than 80 employees or so. But the big thing here is that they don't have any sort of internal IT people presence department in-house. And so your MSP is coming in and you're offering outsourced IT services. And you are agreeing to become basically 100% responsible for the care, protection, care, maintenance of that organization's network. And if that is the case, if that is what you're signing up for, you're committing to, then it's a packaged program of bundled services that you should be selling to them. You know, really what we talked about last week in last week's boot camp on building security programs. For traditional managed services clients, we don't sell a la carte. You know, we don't sell EDR, backup, MDR, passport. We don't sell any of those products in a silo because it's too risky, because of the amount of the responsibility that your MSP is agreeing to taking on. So this isn't a tool sale. You know, we're not reselling a tool or reselling a product by basically, you know, taking what we paid and then we're marking it up 25, 30%. That's not what we're doing here. What we're doing is we're combining these tool sets into a package program that includes other security tool sets and other consulting services. And last week I kind of talked about how do we layer those tool sets together to create the essential program or to create that advanced security program. Or if you're planning on targeting maybe bigger organizations, larger organizations, like mid to upper enterprise organizations that tend to have, you know, 80, 100 employees or more, these types of organizations are large enough that they likely will have or do have an internal IT in-house organization for that. You know, so there's people in place that are paid by the company to take care of their network. And so we refer to that as a co-managed client. And so for a co-managed client, we price and sell our services very differently to these types of organizations. So when it comes to the co-managed larger organization, we can sell them in an a la carte manner, completely appropriate. It is okay to sell tool sets on an individual basis because you as the MSP are not ultimately responsible for the organization's network. The internal IT director or whoever that internal department is, that's their job. So in the co-managed model, all the MSP is doing is offering to help out, you know, partner, take on a certain component off of the internal IT's shoulders. We're just trying to help them lessen the burden of their to-do lists. So yes, we can sell, you know, maybe a package bundle of services to a co-managed client. More likely, especially if you're starting out with that organization, starting to build that relationship, it typically works more in a piecemeal manner. You know, you offer a service, you prove yourself, you strengthen your relationship with the internal IT staff, then you possibly sell them another service to kind of help them out. So, you know, you're kind of selling each service on an individual basis, depending on what the needs of that internal IT department are. And so I really wanted to start off my pricing bootcamp with this very important distinction, because again, depending on what type of organization you're targeting, whether there is that presence of an internal IT administrator or not, that is what is ultimately going to determine what you sell them and what you charge them. And again, when we talk about the pricing strategy for the traditional managed services customer type, it isn't so much about working out the price per program level or you know, as I said, the average per user or per device price in a particular part of the country. I'm going to be focusing on the theory, again, that goes into setting your prices, you know, for the security programs that we talked about last week, and the components that need to be considered when you are setting your program pricing. And these components, they're the same, basically, no matter where in the world your MSP is located. So the idea is that you can take this theory and then use it wherever you happen to be. So looking at those components that go into determining an MSP's price, the numbers that you're seeing here, they come from our partners that are currently enrolled in our business transformation, operational efficiency and benchmarking program. That is a program that Enable runs. Hopefully people have taken, participated in that. It's run by my colleague, Chris Matzi. So as part of that benchmarking, he was kind enough to provide me kind of what we're seeing from our partners, you know, basically looking at best in class MSPs versus the lower performing MSPs. But when it comes to setting your monthly price, again, we can only do that once we've kind of determined what our feature set is going to be and what that tech stack is going to be that we've standardized on. Once you've kind of built out that essential and advanced program based on that standardized tech stack. And so when we look at our monthly price, it's generally broken down into three main components. We have our tools costs, we have our labor costs, and then whatever our margin percentage goal happens to be. And it's generally the labor costs and the margin goal that sets an underperforming MSP apart from a higher performing MSP. So the first component that we really need to think about is our software costs. This is really the cost of the tool sets that are needed to deliver the services that we've defined or included as part of our program. This is generally the lowest cost component of an MSP's overall price. To drive down tools price as much as possible, best-in-class MSPs, they do standardize on their tool sets that they use to deliver their services. And because of that standardization, they generally benefit from volume discounts from their vendors, whoever they decide to move forward with. Whereas maybe an underperforming MSP, they haven't done as good of a job of standardizing on their tool sets. These are the types of MSPs that are generally using maybe 4 or 5 different backup products. They're using, 4 or 5 different endpoint protection products. So because of this, their tool costs tend to be trending higher because they don't get to benefit from the volume discounts because they've kind of opted to spread out their purchases across multiple vendors. Also, tool sets here include more than just the cost of the tech stack that you need to deploy at your customer's location. We're also including the cost of whatever RMM PSA that you're using to manage your MSP department or your MSP practice. But generally, through our business transformation, we're seeing tools costs range anywhere from 10 to 16% of the MSP's monthly price that they charge. Again, really depends on the program that they develop and that they're taking to market. The second component of an MSP really needs to consider is their labor costs, and this is really kind of your technician's costs. These are the costs of the engineers that are going to be used to help manage and support the program. Our best in class from our business transformation, the labor component generally makes up around 22% of the overall price that's charged to customers. But this could be a little bit higher, if the program also encompasses maybe some higher end security where maybe, you built out your own SOC, you have your own SIM as part of that program. Instead of outsourcing it, you've built it up and developed it in-house. But generally, direct labor is the largest component of a program's overall cost. So in order to try and mitigate the impact direct labor is going to have on the overall price, this is where the MSP is going to want to optimize their technicians as best they can, making sure that they're leveraging automation in their tool sets wherever possible. That they've standardized on their tool sets and they're operating best practices and procedures. And the amount of labor that's built into the monthly price, this is going to be dependent on whether maybe they're offering kind of a fully managed all-inclusive program versus if maybe we're just offering kind of a proactive type of program where all that reactive labor is separated out and billed additionally. Because if the MSP is offering kind of a fully managed comprehensive type of program, then this is where we need to factor in and budget in some additional time and labor because this is where we have to deal with kind of the unpredictableness that comes with a fully managed type of program. All that reactive extra labor we have to kind of factor in, from the support desk or from the help desk perspective, because if we recall, in an all-inclusive type of program, we don't have the luxury to go back and bill additionally if something catastrophic happens, to the customer's network, or if the customer has needy end users who, they know they're part of an all-inclusive program, so they're going to call in for every willy-nilly issue that they have, every little thing that goes wrong with their computer. So the MSP has to be prepared for this and has to make sure that they're budgeting that extra time accordingly. And then other labor costs that we need to also incorporate into the program, things like our VCIO services. Every MSP has to make sure that they are meeting with each one of their customers on at least a semi-annual basis. And with your really good customers, at least quarterly, you should be meeting with them. So we need to make sure that we're factoring in time for those type of consulting sit-down meetings as well. Now, some MSPs spend more on tool sets, less on labor, but basically what we're finding is the goal is to kind of keep that combination of tools and labors to around 38% of the total program pricing. And then once all the costs have been identified, this is when you then need to determine, okay, what margin goal do I want to set for myself, or what margin goal do I want to earn on my programs? And the margin percentage that you decide to build in depends on a few things. Obviously, your overhead costs, cost of sales, admin costs, wherever you happen to be in the world, so your geographical market location, but also this concept of a risk premium, for the security specific specialization that you are providing and the level and severity of risk that you are assuming on behalf of the client. Because when we're selling managed services, as we talked about last week, it has to be now an emphasis on security protection coverage. I still see MSPs that they break it out. They have their managed services program, and then they have their security services. And really, we shouldn't be selling them separately anymore. They should be an all-in-one type of package with that emphasis on security. And that whole program design philosophy that centers around risk and risk mitigation. And this risk premium really takes into account who's going to be responsible for assuming and carrying that risk. When we get to a comprehensive program or an advanced security program, it's going to be mostly you as the MSP that is going to be taking on the majority of that risk. So best-in-class MSPs, we're seeing them really aim for a margin percentage goal north of 60%, but I've seen this be higher for really successful MSPs. I've seen it as high as probably 75, 80% margin that they're building in. And when we get to the costing calculator, I'll show you how you can kind of play around with those numbers and then the impact that they're going to have. But just kind of keep that 62% in mind, because when you do download the costing worksheet, the Excel spreadsheet, and when I go through our pricing labs momentarily, you'll see that I'm just committing to that 62% number. So you can kind of see from there. All right, but again, a couple more things I want to chat about before we get into the costing calculator. Some cautionary notes, really. First off, don't price based on what the competition is charging. Don't aim to be the cheapest in your market. Many times I will have MSPs that will tell me, well, I need to be cheaper, because my competitor is charging this. I was just doing some website review yesterday, and all over the MSP's website was talking about free and don't worry about expensive IT. We are your cheaper solution. Like we don't want to put that messaging out in the market, because this is where I feel MSPs have really done themselves a grave disservice by always focusing on their price and being really, overly concerned on what their competitors are charging for their programs. And I think this is a large reason why we still have pricing commoditization in the marketplace today. MSPs have, I think, trained business owners, pretty well to just kind of flip to the last page of their proposal where that price is located, and they haven't done as good of a job of educating and communicating how they're different, why they are different, especially in terms of their approach and the value that they offer. And so that's what we focused a lot last week on, redesigning your programs, specializing in security and bringing in that security and compliance angle into the program development mix and into the marketing of it, because this is something that you can use to differentiate yourself from your competitors, and you can focus on the benefits and the outcomes that you're providing with your comprehensive security program, advanced security program, instead of focusing on the price. And, so hopefully in part 1 of that boot camp, when we spoke about program development, for those of you that attended it, you saw that there's different features, there's different variables that go into the program design process. So in a lot of cases, a customer's not getting kind of a true apples to apples comparison. And so it's for this reason where education is so important, and why MSPs need to educate prospects on, no, I can't match that competitor's price, or yes, I am more expensive than maybe who you're using today, or other MSPs in the area. Also, a big one that I talk about a lot, don't price your programs based on what you think your customers can afford. Your customers are never going to want to pay you or try to get out of paying you what you are worth. And a lot of MSPs, they're scared and hesitant to have kind of that risk and security conversation with their customers, because they know that by implementing kind of a layered approach to security like we talked about last week, it is going to cost more, and it is going to cost their customers more than what they're probably paying for currently. And so a lot of times, I'll have conversations with MSPs about programs and pricing, and they will often pre-object on behalf of their customers. And they'll say, well, no, I can't talk to my customer about my new security program because they'll never buy into it. So they never even have the conversation with that customer. And so because they're pre-objecting, they're underpricing their offerings, or they're reducing the number of services in their offering to meet some sort of preconceived price budget or price point, instead of really kind of standing firm and being confident in the security program that they've designed, and really educating again their prospects on why the programs are structured and priced the way they are. Also, and for the 33% that say that they are pricing, or 67%, sorry, they're saying that they're pricing per device, we want to move away from that. We don't really want to price per device, but we really do, especially for kind of a fully managed program, we want to price per user instead. And, you may see when we go through the costing exercise, we're going to start out, our calculations thinking per device, but when we actually speak to the customer, we want to show them our proposal. We want it to be focused on per user. You're going to take the total cost of the program across all devices, so all desktops, servers, network gear, firewalls, and then we're going to divide it by the number of users in the organization so that we can present that per user price to the decision maker. And we do this because from a positioning and messaging standpoint, we're protecting users with our programs. We're educating users with our programs. And so we want the focus of our sales conversations and our messaging to be on the users and not kind of the technical tidbits that we're managing. Because again, going back to what we talked about last week, employees are generally the ones behind breaches, right? Depending on the reports that you read, I've read some reports as low as 37% of breaches are caused by employees. I've seen it as high as 87% of breaches are caused by employees. So we want to focus on the users with our pricing, because we want to do everything that we can to kind of bubble wrap them from clicking on something that they shouldn't have, or behaving in some sort of unsecure way that can allow an attack to take place. People are the most expensive asset of any organization. So our goal with our programs is to do what we can to keep them safe, protected, productive, and working. We also want to make sure that you understand fully what goes into your fully burdened labor rate. A fully burdened labor rate is the full cost of an hour's worth of work. So we're looking at things like all payroll taxes, vacation pay, health insurance, supplies, meals, training, any other benefits or expenses that are related to that individual's employment. If this is something that you're not really sure how to calculate, there's a lot of information out there. You can easily Google it, or I'm sure your accountant or bookkeeper will be able to help calculate this for you. And then lastly, because I used to see this all the time when I managed accounts, be honest in the amount of direct labor and the HR time that is actually going to be needed to deliver the programs. You're going to see when we go through the pricing lab that we have built in estimates in terms of labor based on what MSPs have told us, but these are making some assumptions here. You know, these are assuming that we are a fully automated MSP shop, that we are 100%, 150% proficient in how we use our tools and the automation, that the capabilities that are built in. Skimping on time estimates in an attempt to reduce our monthly price because we're trying to make it fit into a customer's monthly price point, that is only going to hurt your profitability and revenue levels. So if you're going through this exercise and you're finding that your labor time estimates are higher, and you feel that, you know, you're building in too much time or too much labor into the program where it's inflating your monthly price, then this is where we might need to kind of take a step back and kind of look internally and see where automation and optimization, tool set standardization, you know, all of that, you know, how can we improve that? And the biggest pricing mistake that I see, that I am a big proponent of helping MSPs avoid, is neglecting to implement price increases. You know, if you haven't done so yet, I feel MSPs are getting better with this, but if you haven't done this yet, you really should be setting up a cadence and setting a precedent when it comes to price increases. Your costs go up every year, you know, whether it's your business costs or, you know, having to kind of deal with the general increases in inflation. So therefore, to maintain your own profitability levels, you have to build in price increases into your annual contract renewals, because you need those to offset your increases in costs. It's just the fact of running a business. And if you are, you know, maybe determined that you're spending more time than you initially thought at the beginning of the contract to support a customer's network, then that's your opportunity to use that renewal time to then adjust their monthly price point to kind of help level set their pricing moving forward. But either way, by not implementing regular price increases, your revenues, your profitability, they're just going to continue to erode year over year, and that's going to end up having a negative impact on your business valuation levels over time. So just a couple of approaches to handling price increases, especially if you've never done something like this before with your clients. A couple of ones, you know, you can just tear off the Band-Aid, right? You know, just bring it up at their next executive business review or quarterly business review meeting. Tell them that you have to start implementing price increases, and let them know when it's going to be in effect, like whether it's at their next renewal or maybe it's in the next, you know, 60, 90 days, because these are really needed to offset your growing costs. Or better yet, and this kind of leads into what we talked about last week, price increases generally go over better if the customer can see that they're getting increased value in exchange for the monthly price increase. And that's why implementing a new program structure, you know, like what we talked about last week, along with the price increase, it works well, because then it isn't really a price increase for the sake of a price increase, but rather, you know, you've gone and redesigned your entire managed services practice, and you're now introducing a new suite of security programs aimed at providing better threat protection, detection, remediation services for all of your customers. And so that's why their monthly price is changing for all of your customers, because you're working to standardize your customers across this, you know, this new breed of security offerings. And another way to introduce price increases, this actually came from a partner probably a couple of years ago now, but he attended our office hours. We had a big conversation around price increases, how to implement them. I actually had the pleasure of meeting him at Empower last year in Prague, but he was kind enough to kind of share with the group how their MSP handles price increases. And what they do, and they're not a big MSP. I think there was 4 or 5, maybe 6 employees tops. So as I go through this, don't think, well, they're a big MSP, they can afford to do that. No, they're not a big MSP. I think they have 6 employees total. But how they built their security packages and their programs is they bundle it and version it by cars. You know, so they had the 2023 security suite, the 2024 security suite. They're working on the 2025 security suite. And then all customers have to be on that latest bundle when it comes up at renewal. And I loved this approach because it offered so many benefits. I think first, it really does promote product standardization. It keeps every customer on the same program with the same feature set and the same tech stack. And through this product standardization approach, it just naturally makes it much easier for your MSP to onboard, service, support your customers, because the tech stack is pretty much the same across the board for everyone. So it makes it very easy for the techs to stay current on the latest feature sets. They can stay up to date on their training. They can really elevate the proficiency because there's only one set of products that they have to concern themselves with, right? They're not spending cycles trying to keep up with 5 or 6 different endpoint protection products, 5 or 6 different backup products, a couple of different spam filtering products. That is extremely difficult, and there's no way that your team can be completely proficient in that many different types of products. So what they do their research, they vet their products, and they standardize on that one type of technology solution for whatever function that they're supporting. Also, what I love about their approach is it positions them as the experts, and it affords them the flexibility and the luxury to change out their products whenever they feel it's necessary, or it gives them the luxury and the flexibility to amend the product mix if they find that there's better versions, new versions, or it really gives them the opportunity to introduce a new product if they feel that maybe the threat and security landscape, it's changed so much in the past year that it now warrants it. So as I'm talking about these security bundles, please don't think that they're throwing the baby out with the bathwater each and every year. They're not. A lot of the times they're not making changes to the security bundle, but what they're doing is it gives them the opportunity, if they feel that the threat landscape has changed, there's a new product. Let's use MDR, Managed Detection and Response, as an example. They now recognize the need to get an MDR solution built into their security bundle. This approach allows them that luxury to do that. And what it also does is it removes the notion of them having to get their customers' permission first, before they're able to make changes to their programs and their tech stack. So many times I've been dealing with MSPs and they'll say, Steph, I really like EDR, I really like MDR, I really like, password management, insert product here, but I can't buy it until I go talk to my customers first to see if it's something that they're going to buy from me. And that's not an approach that we can take, these days when it comes to security. This is really a tell, don't sell approach now. That they've been doing for many, many years, and that we really think every MSP needs to kind of have that sales mentality, especially when it comes to selling security. And so what they do is they look at their program bundle. If there's any new programs that need to be factored in, they get them factor in, and they implement their price increase, and then that new security bundle is then automatically applied, the new pricing that goes into effect. Obviously making sure that they're giving their customers ample warning about the new pricing. I think they said it's generally 3 months, and that they let them know what the price increase is going to be. And generally it's in the kind of the 5 to 6% range that they've told me about. Lastly, I think through this approach as well, it removes the element of surprise. Their customers from the very beginning have understood this arrangement. It's in their contracts. And so they've just always generally accepted it as part of doing business with them. And they rarely receive any sort of pushback on that because it's built into their contract. The customers understand that every year they can expect that, maybe things might change. They expect their MSP to be reevaluating their security stack, and that this is just a natural part of the support strategy to ensuring that the customers remain safe and secure as possible. And I think it's a really great marketing message that MSPs should be leaning into. And they also understand that, with the pace of change that occurs within the threat landscape, sometimes changes do need to be made. And as the MSP, it's okay to be telling customers, yeah, I'm going to reevaluate this every year. There might be some new products that we put in, there might be some old products we take out, but it's a good thing that we're constantly reevaluating the landscape, looking at, the new technology tools that come out. And if we feel that they're going to provide better protection, detection, response, we're going to get those added in, and we'll let you know what the new monthly price will be moving forward. So because this has always been part of their culture, their customers just understand that, and they do come to anticipate that. So really kind of the moral of the story is don't be afraid, if you haven't done this yet, to implement price increases, especially if this is something you've never done before, or maybe you were always in the habit of doing price increases, COVID hit, and maybe you just never got back into it. We are now, what, 3 years post-COVID now. I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Your customers are likely expecting it from you if you haven't done it yet, and they're probably just wondering when you're going to do it. Obviously they're not going to come out and ask you, to raise their prices. But if you finally, tell them, look, we're redesigning our programs, we have to raise our prices, I don't think they're going to be too surprised. Everybody else has raised their prices on them. They've just been wondering why you haven't. And your good customers, they will understand. Obviously, they might have some questions around it, but they will likely generally be good about it, especially if they're implemented in kind of the proper, appropriate way. If it comes with an enhanced suite of security services, or you're making some investments in your MSP, you're trying to hire some quality, high quality, or keep very high quality staff, they're going to understand that. And then if you do have customers that push back and give you a difficult time, maybe they're not the type of client that we want to keep on as a client anyways moving forward. And so next week's boot camp, we're going to talk about some objection handling techniques, some responses on how we can handle some of this pushback, because obviously we don't want to lose clients, but if they are adamant that they're not going to sign, that they don't want to pay, that they don't want to have anything to do with your program redesign, we're going to talk about some approaches to deal with that. Okay. All right, so let's get into how we're going to price. We're going to go through the Essentials program and the Advanced program using the security, our costing calculator that you can make sure that you can download from the website. So just a reminder, we're going to start with the Essentials program first, what it looks like. If you missed part 1 last week, I really look at that Essentials program as being our minimum viable program. It's a program that every customer should be a part of. If this is the only program that you're going to offer, this replaces any reactive programs. This replaces any a la carte programs that maybe you might have been selling previously. Those program tiers no longer a viable option because it just opens up too much unnecessary risk to your customer and to yourself. And so, it kind of equated it to kind of the good, better, best, because I get that question quite a bit from MSPs. This would really kind of be your good program, because we're focusing on protecting the endpoint and the user. And so when we get into the calculator, you're going to see that we basically have 3 sets of costs that we are going to consider. We have our software costs, and those are basically everything that's in purple. We have our labor costs, and that's basically everything that's in brown. And then we have our support costs, which are in red. In this case, they're just going to be billed separately because this is just an Essentials program. So what I mean by that, in the Essentials program, all your help desk calls, all your emails, your chat, all of that reactive type of support, those are going to be billed separately at whatever your time material rate is. Any vendor management emergency. So either bill them separately, or we have MSPs that still sell blocks of time. You can then just tally everything up and pull it off of that block of time. But generally with the Essentials program, we are trying to keep the price down. So pulling out a lot of that reactive support is going to be one way to do that. Now, because we are still including a lot of proactive elements with the patching and the regular maintenance, hopefully a lot of the reactive work is going to be reduced because of that ongoing maintenance. But this is not an all-inclusive program. So by pulling out the reactive element, it's going to help to bring down our price point a little bit. All right, so what you're seeing here is a screenshot of our costing calculator that we're going to go through. Again, there's a copy there that you can download. If you have any problems downloading that, just let me know. I can get you over a copy of this. Before starting this exercise, it's always very handy to have all of your invoices and contracts in front of you so that you know what your software licensing costs are. So this is just an Excel spreadsheet. Very simple, nothing fancy. Along the bottoms, you're going to see a few different tabs. We have our line card tab, we have our selection tab, we have our quote tab. We're starting at the line card tab first. This is where we're entering in all of our individual per device. Even though we're pricing it out per device, we're not quoting it that way, but we're putting in all of our per device, per user costs here. So looking at the line card tab, along the top, this is where we have to put in our average fully burdened labor rate. I have put $50 US in here as the average, but again, this is going to depend really on what your area of the world is, right? Depending on what your geography, your market, the skill sets of the individual that's going to be delivering or responsible for delivering and taking care of this type of program. You can also choose your local currency. It's a drop down. We have all the currencies around the world built in there. I just have it defaulted to USD. You'll also notice in this calculator that we have some cells that are gray, other cells that are white. All the gray areas, these are your direct inputs. And you can change the names, change the cells, every way you want. You can change the programs, you can change the headers, the services, the software options to whatever you need them to be. The white areas, those are areas with formulas where the cell gets automatically calculated based on whatever the direct input was. So these cells are locked, can't modify them. Only the agent column header is locked. Anything else is modified based on whatever your tech stack or your tech requirements are. Now, you'll see that the calculator is broken down into 3 parts. Again, we have our software costs. These are your per device, per user costs that we're going to fill in. It's really why we want to have all of our software invoices close by so that we can enter in those software costs of the tech stack that we're going to be implementing and using for this program. We also have an area to put in our monthly management time. This is basically our labor that we need to build in for the program level. This is based on that fully burdened labor rate. We have 3 buckets of labor here that we're going to be talking about. That's typically included in a security program. We have all that preventative maintenance checklist activity that we need to do on the different devices outside of the automation aspect. Then we have the reactive remediation time. So those things that we can't anticipate that just pop up. And then we have the consulting time. So this is really the time for if we're doing assessments or if we're doing our sit down QBRs. Okay, so the question came in, the labor rate, is that the labor rate or the amount that we quote? No, this is not the amount that you quote. This is basically what you are charging or what your tech or engineer costs. So when we look at building in the appropriate margin, that's going to take in into account what you're actually charging for. What we're just trying to figure out is what are our true costs, so true support costs, true software costs. And so this is just what that hourly rate that employee costs you in your MSP. It's not what, yeah, it's not the 150 that you may charge him out at. It's what he costs you in your organization. So hopefully that makes sense. Good question. All right, so then there's also the other cost here. We don't really use this all too much. You might use this if maybe from a security perspective, you're a Barracuda customer, or maybe use Datto for your backup. So those appliance costs in there, we need to get those appliance costs added in because they are part of your program deliverables. So if you have any sort of usually hardware costs, then we would put those costs in there, you know, take the appliance, amortize it over 12, 24 months, whatever you want, and then put that number in there. So we're going to start with the software cost section first. This is where we're adding in the software costs of all of the different pieces of software that's going to be installed to support and deliver the program. You can see in column B that we can name the programs whatever we want. You actually in the calculator have the ability to create pricing for up to 4 different programs. Cells aren't locked, so you can, really name them whatever you want. You can see that I've renamed one of the headings the Essentials Security Program. So with the Essential Security Program, all the different software licenses that we need to account for. In the agent column, this is where we want to add in all of our RMM licensing, whether you're using Insight and Central or whatever, other RMM that you happen to be using. This is where we want to put in those costs for, server, network, and workstation. If there happens to be maybe an M365 license user cost that you want to factor in, I've seen some partners do that. You got to start kind of doubling up. You could use the agent column here and add that in as well, in addition to the desktop RMM cost. I haven't done this because it really depends on whether your customers are in P1, P2, or E3 or E5, or maybe you keep it separate. But I have seen partners build in whatever the cost of the Microsoft licensing. I am starting to see this more and more, especially as MSPs are going forward with security as their primary focus. A lot of the times with security, they want their customers to have kind of the higher end, E3, E5 license. So they're starting to build it in, especially if maybe their customers are on a P1 or P2. So if you are going to wrap it in, this is the agent column, adding it into the RMM seems to be the best place to do that. Then you'll see the next column is where we're putting in our endpoint protection, our managed detection response, any other security tool sets that you might be using. So if you recall from last week, we talked about the Essentials program. We use SentinelOne here in Enable. So this is the cost of the SentinelOne EDR complete license. We also built in the vigilance, and we built that into the server and the desktop line. But again, if you use a different EDR, you would just put in those costs there. Risk management, vulnerability management, this is where you would add in the cost of whatever your preferred solution is. Again, in the Essentials program, we were doing a risk assessment once a quarter. We don't have a tool set here at Enable yet. I don't know, hopefully we get one that I could sell you, so I haven't put any cost in here, but it should be a feature of the program. So whatever you're using to deliver your risk assessment, whatever that software cost is, we want to make sure we get it incorporated. Looking at the backup, M365 backup, if you recall in the last weeks, we talked about Cove. We sell Cove data protection here at Enable. As part of the Cove product suite, we have what we call a documents license that's used for desktop. It's just basically a very low cost license. I think it's $1.10. And what we're just doing is it's an insurance policy to make sure that anything that's stored on the laptop, any critical files like Word, PowerPoint, Excel, PDFs, something happens, we're backing up that desktop as well, even though most partners and most people have Microsoft 365. So we want to make sure that we're including the cost of that license as well. And so those are just our server license costs and M365 and the documents license cost when we look at the backup. If we're doing mail archiving, this is where we add in the cost of whatever your mail, web filtering, email protection software that you're using. This is our Mail Assure that we offer in this example. Then whatever DNS, URL, web filtering that you're using. Again, I'm just referencing our own DNS filter for that. And then any sort of password management, MFA software that you might have in place. So I'm just putting in place our Passportal end user license, which is our site license included in this. Once you add in all of your software costs, column K gives us all of the costs for the server, for the network, for the workstation. Now, when I talk about software licensing, I always caution, don't use your discounted rates that you received from your vendor when you're using and inputting your software costs. I really advocate put in whatever your vendor's MSRP pricing is. The reason I say this is if for some reason you need to reduce your licensing, a lot of times that will forfeit whatever vendor discounts you happen to receive. You got a vendor because of your volume. And so if you have vendor discounts, that's wonderful. But if by some reason you decide to reduce the software licensing that you have with your vendor, don't be surprised if they go and raise your prices on you, right? Because you got the discount because of the quantity. So this is why I always say just put in whatever the MSRP licensing, even if you have vendor discounts. Basically, this is just going to be extra gravy. It is going to overinflate, I think, your contract margins, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I would rather err on the side of being a little bit more conservative, put in the highest unit cost for the smallest volume tier when building out pricing. So if there is a change in the quantity in the discount structure, you're not going to be as negatively impacted by it. Then looking at our monthly management time, this is all in minutes, minutes per device. So column L is our preventative maintenance. This is really all of that routine maintenance that is needed to be completed each month on all the on a particular server, network, like a firewall, router, switch, and desktops that are included in the program. Again, what I've mentioned, these are just kind of averages from what partners have told us in the past. But the key here is we want to automate as much of that maintenance that we can to minimize this labor component. So if you are a highly automated firm, these averages might be a lot lower. I might be largely overstating the time that's needed. But if you are still doing a lot of your maintenance tasks manually, then these budgeted times, they actually could be a lot higher. So this is where I want you to be honest in terms of the actual labor that is being spent. And if you're not sure and we're guessing, then this is something we're moving forward, maybe use our averages, but then moving forward, make sure you are tracking that within your PSA so that when you go to do your price increases, you'll have some actual quantifiable data to kind of correct this. Because again, if we're under reporting how much labor, then that's cutting into our margins and we need to get that corrected. Column M is that remediation time. Again, this isn't an all-inclusive type of program, so there's a lot of time that we don't have to account for, but because we are including the vigilance service from SentinelOne, the vigilance team, they're going to handle the alerts that come in from the endpoint protection product. But if there is any additional work that's needed, maybe from a recovery or getting back to business standpoint, like maybe they need to, get a machine re-imaged, or maybe you have to go in and maybe change some user passwords, like kind of that finishing cleanup work. The vigilance team isn't going to do that, but what they're going to do is let you do it. It's those tasks are going to be passed over to you. So we want to make sure that we're budgeting sufficient time for that, because even though vigilance is helping you, you are still going to be the face to the customer. So there might be some face-to-face time that we need to build in as well as we're kind of recovering from an event. So I've budgeted in about 10 minutes per server per month, 3 minutes per desktop per month. Again, this isn't full-scale incident response. That would be billable at whatever your time material rates, and hopefully they have cyber insurance in place so that when you send them the bill for that, they can go to their insurance company, get reimbursed, and pay you. But this is, again, just for general maintenance, upkeeping, surrounding the SentinelOne vigilance recommendations, so that if there was an event, that type of event can't happen again. So it's kind of some of that remediation work. Again, just ballpark estimates. Definitely recommend tracking the time that you're spending on these activities. So if you are finding that you're spending more or less, you can get that corrected. Then we have our consulting time that we're building in. Very important, even at the essentials level. you'll see that in column B, I've added a couple of line items for quarterly risk assessments, basic training, semi-annual reports. So you'll see that I built time in for that. Basically, what I've done is just, figured it out for the year and then brought it down to a monthly time. But that is time because doing a quarterly risk review, looking at the reports, putting a plan together, preparing for your sit down executive business review meeting, doing your security training, that is all going to take labor. And we want to make sure that we're factoring that labor in and being compensated for it accordingly. So then that gives us our total costs, which is our software costs, plus our labor costs across each device. Column S, this is where we now start to kind of enter our price per device or per service. And this is where we play around with the price, to get whatever that desired margin that we want. And so you're going to see the margin percentage goal in column U. So you're going to see when you download this and what you see here, I already have the average prices entered when you go and download that calculator. But based on whatever your own margin goals that you set in column U, the prices in column S are going to change. But again, going back to our benchmarking data from our operational efficiency business program, our best-in-class MSPs are aiming for about 62%. You can see that I put 62% there as my margin goal. I played around with the pricing in column S to get the prices that's going to hit that 62%. So hopefully that makes sense. But these are not prices that you see in column S that get quoted to the customer. This is all for internal calculations only so that we can get to the per user price point. So even though it's an example, it's showing, server and backup, we're pricing it at $254 a month. Network price of $39 a month. Desktop price of $66 a month. Those are not prices that we quote to the customer. Again, it's just what is needed so that we can satisfy that 62% margin goal that we've set for ourselves. So then once you've kind of entered in all of your software costs, labor costs, desired margin into the line card tab, this is where we want to move into, oh, went too fast. This is where we want to move into, come on. There we go, sorry about that. This is where we want to move into the selections tab. And so this is the tab where, the blue, the proactive section, this is our essentials program. This is where we start coming up with kind of the individual customer price. So for every customer, more or less, you're going to want to go through this calculator. The line card tab probably is not going to change from customer to customer because you have your essentials program, you're going to have your advanced program that we're going to go through momentarily. But this is the tab when you're putting your proposal together for an essentials program. You go into the selections tab, you enter in the number of devices that you're going to be monitoring and managing. So for our example today, let's say that this is a customer that has 20 employees. So there's 20 desktops. Maybe they have one firewall and they have one server. So in the proactive section, this is where we're going to enter those device counts. Then where it says quarterly risk assessment scans, basic security training, semi-annual executive review, this is where we need to enter 1 in each of the cell because that's basically turning it on. And it signifies to the calculator that we are including those additional costs into the overall costing. And then we go into the quote tab. Don't worry about what you see at the top there. I don't want you using this in front of an actual client. This is just something, again, that's an internal tool to help you determine what that pricing is going to be, and then you port that into your proposal template. But you can see that, when we go through and put in all of our devices that we're going to be covering underneath this contract based on all the costs from the line card tab, you can see that we get a monthly cost of $2,043. You can see that it confirms that we are meeting our contract margin of 62%, which is what we wanted it to be. Now we do have to do some little napkin math here to kind of get to the user price. So all we did was we took that 2043, divided it by 20 employees. So you can see that it comes out to about $102 per user per month. Now, some caveats with this pricing. This is not complete end user monthly pricing yet that you're going to put in your proposal and quote to your client. It's going to be actually a little bit higher than this. This is also based on our enable pricing, US pricing, MSRP pricing without any discounts at our highest tier. Again, if you're using other software to deliver these features, your pricing may be different depending on what costs you're incurring there. You will notice that we are missing software tools costs here around our assessments that we're doing, MFA, security training, if maybe we're using a company to deliver this, M365 user license costs that maybe we want to incorporate as well. So that's going to raise the software licensing costs as well, and it's also going to increase our overall cost. So again, the 102 isn't that price that we're going to be quoting. Also, keep in mind, this doesn't include any of that reactive labor that we talked about that's typically part of an all-inclusive program. The only thing we've really budgeted in for was the SentinelOne Vigilance Service and some of the cleanup work that we might have to do after an event. So this does not have any help desk costs, no emergency costs, there's no vendor management in here. So we want to make sure we let the customer know about this. Be careful not to promote this as an all-inclusive type program, even though I am saying, $102 per user per month. There will be some additional cost variable depending on what the reactive nature is from the employees each and every month. But again, we're doing a lot of work to prevent issues from happening. So hopefully that reactive element is minimized as much as possible. And again, we went through everything on a per device pricing basis, but we're costing it that way, but we're not promoting it that way. We just want to make sure that we figure out all of our costs and then divide it by the number of users. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. So when it's all said and done, I usually see this program at around $150 per month, $150, $160, $165 for a program of this caliber at the essentials level. So we'll quickly go through kind of the same exercise from the advanced program. So again, going back to last week's, this is basically what's included in an advanced security program. So using the costing calculator again, how are we going to price out the advanced program? Again, we're going back to the line card. You'll see along the top that we make sure we put in our average rate. This may be a little bit higher because maybe with the advanced security program comes a more skilled engineer that costs you more. So maybe this is $60 or maybe this is $75, even though we might be billing them out at $250 or $300. Again, it's what your cost is to have that individual. So again, starting with the software costs, a lot of it is the same with the Essentials program, but we're going to be adding in some new software licensing because the advanced program does have a more extensive security stack. So you'll see I now have a section for the advanced security here. You'll see all the costs in there. You'll see what the costs, software costs end up having to be. You can see the management time that we're building in for all of this. Again, all the preventative maintenance. Here we are building in reactive, the remediation time, because this is an all-inclusive type of program. This is, kind of the fixed fee or the fully managed, those older terminologies that we used to use, meaning that we want to make sure that we are including all of that help desk, end user, chat, email, vendor management, any small tasks that might be recommended by, the enable MDR service. All of that time we need to factor in, because if something happens, we don't have the luxury to go back and say, hey, we got to charge you for this, or, you know, here's another bill, or we're just going to pull this off of the block. We need to make sure that we do a really good job budgeting what that overtime, that extra time might be. And this is where it will be absolutely critical that, especially if you're delivering and moving forward with a fixed fee, that you are tracking within your PSA the time, even though we're not billing for it, you know, to the customer, that we are accounting for that. So when their renewal comes up in a year or so, we can look at how much preventative maintenance time, remediation time, consulting time we actually have done over the year, because we might, if we underestimated, we need to make sure that we get that corrected. So again, other costs, if this is, again, if you have hardware, again, any appliances that are going in, then we get to, you know, the program pricing. Again, this is where we play around with the pricing to kind of get whatever the desired margin here that we want. You'll see that I put 62% in again, but I've seen it higher, especially at this program level, because you're taking on more risk at this level. I've seen it as high as 75, 80%. But again, I'm just kind of keeping with our 62%. So you'll see that to achieve a 62% margin on the server, we have to price this out at $392 per server. To reach 62% on the network, we need to price this at a 108. To get 62% on the desktop, we need to price this at 139. But again, not the actual prices we quote to our clients. We just need to figure everything out on the per device basis so that we can get that translated into the per user price for our proposal. All right, so going back to the selection tab again, because this is the tab that we would use when we're trying to determine what individual customer pricing will be that goes on our proposal. So again, we're in the selection tab. We're in the yellow area, so the managed core element. This is our advanced program. For this instance, for our strawman type of client, they have 2 servers, a couple of network devices, 30 users. So we have those pieces added in there. And then making sure that we have ones in place for the monthly risk assessment, the security training, the quarterly executive review. We want to make sure that we turn that on and get that incorporated into the program. Going into the quote tab again, don't worry about the stuff at the top, making sure that all of our costs, our device counts are good. We're getting a monthly program cost of $5,618. You can see that we are satisfying our 62% margin goal like we wanted it to be. Again, this should be higher for this program level. I will leave that up to you. But then doing some napkin math, you can see when we divide the 5618 by 30, it comes out to around $187 per user per month. But again, it's still incomplete pricing, like what I talked about before. We're missing the vulnerability scanning. We're missing, you know, the cost for the advanced security training. We're missing some of that consulting time. I only used a $50 per hour fully burdened rate. That rate might be higher because we're using more expensive staff potentially, you know, especially if you do have your own SOC, your own SIM, more expensive employees to deliver and work out of that. So once you factor in all of those costs, you are probably looking more around the, you know, kind of the 225, you know, range as well. So again, just with the pricing lab, reviewing kind of how the essentials program would get priced out, how the advanced program would get priced out. Really, it doesn't matter what program you build, what services you include in that program. Hopefully, it's evident that the theory doesn't change. It remains basically the same. You know, for any program, you're going to want to determine what the feature sets are, what the services are going to be that you're including in that program. Again, kind of going back what we talked about last week in part 1 of the series, determining what your tech stack is going to be, how that's going to be implemented for the services that make up your program, determining how much time, labor are going to be needed to deliver those services, especially for the manual maintenance, manual preventative maintenance aspect, the consulting side of things. If you are going to offer fixed fee, that all inclusive, making sure that we're budgeting in sufficient time to deal with the emergencies, the unexpected help desk calls, emails, chat, that type of thing. Because again, we don't have the luxury to go back and say, hey, we got to charge you a little bit more because your server, kind of exploded. We want to make sure that we're actively building in that support. And then making sure that we are setting a realistic gross margin. Again, 62% is the norm that we're seeing. If you look at service leadership, if anybody subscribes to their material, they're more in like the 50-52% range, but at least 50% or more you should be setting as your gross margin goal. I've seen a lot of programs where MSPs are charging a lot less for that. But whatever you decide to start off charging for your programs moving forward, make sure that we are including regular price increases so that this price continues to improve each year. Because again, we want to maintain those margins. And so if you do decide to move forward and use kind of this type of calculator that we went through today, make sure that we are revisiting this calculator often, that we are reworking and redoing our pricing exercise, especially every time your client comes up for renewal, so that you can plug in what their new numbers are going to be from any of the items that may have changed, or maybe where you've experienced a price increase from any vendor that you are working with. And then also for each new client, brand new client that you bring on board, aim to bump up their monthly price by a little bit, by bumping up their margin goal each time, so that you're continually testing the market to see how much the market will pay for this level of security care and concern. That is what best-in-class MSPs do. So I'm talking about, a 62% margin, and if the customer, because you have fantastic salespeople and a fantastic sales process, if the customer readily accepts that, then for the next proposal you put out there, revisit the calculator, adjust your prices up slightly so that maybe you're getting 63% gross margin or 64% gross margin to see if that monthly price is acceptable. And basically keep doing that until you feel that maybe you've hit a ceiling. Because as you get more and more practice, and as your team gets used to talking about the benefits and the outcomes and the value behind these types of programs and what the experience is like working with an MSP like yourself, you're going to get that experience, you're going to get that confidence in how you can handle those objections and that pushback as it relates to monthly price. And so as you get better at selling, ideally, you're going to be able to get away with charging more as well. All right, so just before we wrap up, I did want to provide some industry metrics to help with the pricing exercise. Yes, this comes from the 2022 Service Leadership Benchmark Report. I don't think it's changed all that much. If you're not familiar with the 2022 or any of the service leadership reports, what they do is they do their own set of benchmarking and ask their MSPs a wide variety of questions. This particular piece that I pulled out happened to be around pricing. They do continue to see a trend of higher monthly per user fees from those MSPs that they do benchmark annually, and this was across the board. But they continue to see their top quartiles MSPs, so kind of the top 25%, they are the ones that are growing the fastest. And they contribute that to a few common characteristics, which I agree with as well. The fastest growing MSPs, they really commit to only selling bundled packages. They stick to mostly the higher end, kind of that advanced security program that we talked about last week, but it is kind of that higher end, fully managed, all-inclusive program that they are committed to selling to. They also sell this high-end program at a premium. And I was saying, I see it around, $225, $250. They're seeing it close to $300 per month. For that. Best-in-class MSPs are also very disciplined at raising their prices every year. So they've built in annual price increases into their contracts. Whereas when you look at kind of the medium MSPs that they benchmark, they're charging still a pretty good rate, about $240 per user per month for their premium program. Whereas the bottom quartile MSPs on average are charging much less for the same type of program. Like if you compare the bottom to the top, it's almost 50% less than the top quartile MSPs, about $163 per month for that premier top end advanced program. And it's because of this that, you know, this bottom quartile, which is basically the bottom 25%, they are the ones that are reporting the slowest revenue growth rate when compared to the other two segments. And so service leadership really surmises that the lower performing MSPs, they are the ones that are still selling in kind of an a la carte, non-bundled way. You know, they're the ones that are coming to me and saying, I just bought EDR, what do I charge for it? I just bought MDR, what do I charge for it? I just bought backup, what do I charge for it? So they're still selling kind of products on a product basis, and there's only so much money that you can charge on a per product basis. Or if they are selling in a bundle, they're underpricing their service offerings. You know, they're much less than, you know, the 40 or the 50% gross margin. And also, lastly, because they maybe don't have the sales acumen, maybe they don't have the sales confidence, maybe there's a little bit of fear, hesitation there. They're also haven't been as disciplined in raising their prices every year, and that also is impacting their growth rate. And then from our last business transformation program that we built, it was called Getting to 5 Million. We talked about programs, we talked about pricing, we surveyed the MSPs in the room just to kind of ask and get their opinion on what they were charging per month. So more of an informal enable poll, but we found out of there were 65 people in the room, 42 people participated in the poll. 43% of partners in the room for their premium program was charging less than $100 per user. 24% in the room were charging between $100 and $175. Only 17% in the room were really charging what I believe would be the more appropriate price for a premier advanced program of $175 to $250. There was a couple of guest speakers that we had who spoke to the group during our 2-day event, and they were in kind of the $225 to $285 range for that advanced fully managed program. And they attributed their MSP success to standardizing the program offerings, making sure that they put regular price increases in place. They've amended their contracts so that it mentions that there will be the expectation there of price increases every year. And they really communicated to the group that it was these three things that were really key to helping them kind of exceed their revenue targets and helping them to achieve kind of, you know, 20% plus growth in revenue year over year. So pretty much mimicking what the findings were in the service leadership report as well. So again, I don't normally like giving out pricing because of it depends, but I know obviously a lot of MSPs are curious to see what other people are charging. So I wanted to include these final 2 slides just as some validation in terms of what the market is doing. If you happen to be struggling with your pricing, or maybe you're not pricing anywhere close to this. And so that's where next week's boot camp is going to come into play, where we're going to talk about selling these security programs and how are we going to deal with some of the pushback and some of the objections. And to help with that, you know, everything that I've been talking about last week, today, next week, you can find it within, it's a brand new playbook that I've written called is Defend and Prosper, Maximizing the Cybersecurity Opportunity. I basically call it the Selling Security Playbook. So it's brand new. It's only been out for a few weeks now, a QR code there so that you can download it. It basically is what I feel the companion guide to this bootcamp series, you know, for those that also kind of want that visual aspect. So QR code there. If you have any problems, let me know. I can get it sent over to you. Just as we wrap up, just some, you know, what do we focus on next? If you missed last week's boot camp, really do encourage you to go back to Enable You. It is there now. Watch it on demand. So when I talk about Essentials program, when I talk about Advanced program, why did I build the programs the way I did? How did I layer them all in? That will hopefully make a lot more sense to you as you listen to me today. If you feel that you need to retake this boot camp, because I know this is probably one of the most popular ones where partners will listen, pause, do some work, listen, pause, do some work. It is available on demand. this newest version will be uploaded in probably about a week or so, but the one that's on demand there, it's pretty much the same. There's just a couple of changes that I made to today. If you haven't done so yet, register for part 3. I'm going to have the QR code coming up shortly if you haven't registered yet. Download the costing spreadsheet if you haven't as well. And then, as always, any questions, work with your partner success manager, reach out to me, register for my next round of office hours. I would love to be able to do whatever I can to kind of help you work through that. All right, so just before we wrap up, just want to get everybody's feedback on was the information that was presented today helpful? Because again, it is probably, I think it's probably the biggest question that I get on a weekly basis from partners. Lately, it's also been, I'm not getting any leads. Our sales have been flat. Can you help me with that? So I think there's a lot of MSPs that are doing some planning for 2025 at the moment. But it is generally, how do I price, is what I get. So if there was something that you were looking for me to talk about and I didn't talk about, put that feedback in the question panel, and I want to get this addressed in my next iteration, because I'm always making changes to my boot camps based on feedback from partners. If there's something that wasn't clear, again, let me know so I can get those changes implemented, because again, this is a really big deal, I know, for your MSP, and I want to make sure that we're giving you valuable information to help you with that. So thank you very much to everyone who voted, appreciate that. And then last slide of the day, just a reminder slide of my upcoming office hours, my upcoming boot camps, if you haven't yet registered for them. Again, next week, we are focusing solely on the how do we sell. You know, we talked about how to build. Today, we talked about how to price. Next week, we're talking about how to sell. And then I did reference a little bit the co-managed. November, we're going to be talking about co-managed, what goes into building co-managed programs, what do we mean, how do we price them, how do we go to market with them. And then my last boot camp of the year, December 12th, don't let your MSP become the next big headline, based on a keynote that I did a couple of months ago at an event. We've just turned it into a boot camp because it was seemed to resonate with the audience, so we turned it into a boot camp. All right, so thank you, everyone. Absolutely appreciate your time hanging out with me today. Again, any questions from today, especially as you're working through this, because I know I threw a lot of information, never hesitate to reach out either on LinkedIn or just send me an email or connect with your PSM. Your PSM knows how to get a hold of me as well. So thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time. Enjoy the rest of your day. Have a good week. Take care.